Hey, good morning. In this video, I'm going to be making this bed and put the whole thing together with dowels using this dowel jig. I'll also have another video later with the matching bench down below. Once again, all put together with this one dowel jig. Let's get started. For these two projects, I bought 75 board foot of 8/4 walnut. They charged me $6.53 a board foot, so that came out to $489.75, and that's for the bed and the bench. So I'm going to start off by breaking down some of my lumber. These are going to be the runners down the sides of the bed, and I'm just rough cutting them to size right now. I'll cut them to exact length later. And then those cutoffs on the end, these boards were all 9 to 10 foot. I think the most of them were closer to 10. And so there's the cutoffs from the end. And I'm going to use those to make the spindles out of. And I picked the worst ends for that because the spindles are going to be a little thinner than the rest of it. The rest of it I'm leaving that 2 inches. It's actually 1 inch and 7/8. And these are supposed to have a straight edge on them. I'm just double checking that, running them through the joiner and flattening that edge to make sure it's good and straight. And I'm going to start breaking them down. They're going to be 4 inches wide, so they're basically 2 inches thick and 4 inches wide. And I'll show the length dimensions a little later on in the video. And I'll also have all the descriptions, all the measurements for the different parts in the description. Now these are the boards I'm going to be making my spindles out of, and they're going to be a little thinner than, like I said, a little thinner than the rest of it. So, and this was the end of the boards that weren't perfect, so I'm running those through the joiner to get them nice and flat, and then I'm going to come down the size here on the table saw. So those are going to end up being 28 inches long and 1 3/8 by 1 3/8. And I can't remember exactly how many of those I made. I think I ended up with 19 in the bed. And I just went through all my scraps and cut as many as I had there. And I think I had a couple of extra pieces and a couple pieces I didn't use that had pretty rough ends on them. And some of them still looked a little rough, and it's just on one side, and I faced that towards the back, and you might catch that later, but obviously once the bed's in place, you're never going to see that. Now this is the top, the top rail on the headboard, and it's the same size as the spindles, so it was 1 3/8 by 1 3/8. Also, now I'm going to cut down the legs for the headboard, and those are 4 inches wide also. And I'm making mine 39 inches long. You could easily make yours taller. We wanted our headboard to set underneath that window, or right under at the edge of that window. We didn't want to cover the window up. If you notice that in the beginning shot there, and I'll have some more pictures at the end. But the spindles and that bottom rail actually go down below the mattress, so there's no reason why you couldn't make everything else the exact same size and just have those legs on the ends longer and make your headboard quite a bit taller. Now in that last shot, I was laying those out with spacers because I just don't I don't trust myself with my measurements. It seems like I never quite get it right, so I wanted to actually lay it out. You see here, I just have a T on there for top. I'm picking out the best side to face out, to face front, and then I've also got an arrow for the best end. Uh, and I just wrote that on there so I didn't have to figure it out later on all these little pieces. Now what I'm doing here is marking where each one of those goes on that rail, and then I'm just going to transfer those lines from the top rail to the bottom rail. So I'm going to get those clamped together here, make sure they're lined up perfectly, and then transfer those lines from the top one to the bottom one, because we're going to use those lines here in a little bit to line up that dowel jig and drill all of our dowel holes. So these lines are guides for that dowel jig. Now the important thing here is to remember which side faces up, which side faces down, and make sure you get your dowels, drilled correctly, because they're not perfectly they're perfectly centered, but they're not up and down. They're perfectly centered side to side, but they're not perfectly centered up and down. So on the bottom rail, I'm referencing the bottom side of the rail, and on the top rail, I'm referencing the top of the rail. And now I'm lining it up to those lines I made earlier, and I'm making all my holes for all those spindles. Do the same thing on the bottom. I thought I was a little concerned about, when I was going into this, how difficult this would be, but it actually worked out really well. It came together very easily. Now this is just two spindles stacked together, and I stacked them together so that could clamp down easier. I don't know if you noticed, but on the first one I just did a single spindle and it wasn't clamping down very well. And here again, the marks I put on the spindles earlier, I'm paying attention which way those are facing, because you can see in this shot, see how that hole is not centered on there? It's centered from side to side, but not from top to bottom. So you just need to make sure you remember that, and have them facing the same direction when you're drilling that hole on both ends. Now we're just going to cup a bunch of dowels. I'm going to cut all these dowels up, and then I'm going to go over to the sander and just kind of smooth out the ends of them so they go together easier. And when you have this many things to put together, anything that makes it go together a little easier is worth doing. So it's definitely worth taking this extra time and sanding the ends of those dowels in this case. Now I wasn't extremely worried about all these being perfectly covered in glue. First of all, the quantity of them. There's going to be enough of them holding it together, and then also when we put the legs on the two ends, that's going to hold the whole thing together. So the glue I'm putting on here, isn't that big of a concern. So I didn't smooth it around perfectly. I just got it on there and put it together. And we've had the bed for a couple months now, and so far it's everything has held up great. Get all those dowels in the top, and putting now this was the part that obviously was the trickiest, trying to get this bottom rail put on all these dowels that are already put together. It fell over on me, and then I tried to put it back up there and realized that's not going to work. I'm just going to have to lay it back down. And I ended up taking a pipe clamp and putting some pressure on this end, and that helped the whole a lot. And then as I started getting across, I put pressure on the other end, and then I even got a third one. I'll get a third one here in a second and put pressure in the middle as I'm working across there. And that made a huge difference. I didn't tighten them down a lot, just enough to have a little pressure, and then pull them around. And once you get them lined up, those dowels, especially with the end sanded a little bit, just popped right into place. Now once I start clamping this together, um, I realized that I'm putting all my pressure on the front. You can see all the pipe clamps are on the same side here, and it was curling up that bottom rail a little bit. So as soon as I realized that, I moved them over to some sawhorses and put them on, the top and the bottom. And you'll see me do that here in just a second. Here I'm flipping them back around to get it straightened out. This is a very simple project, but I love the way it looks. I think it came out really good. My wife loves it, so that's the big thing. So after I got it all together, I used a half-inch round over and just put a large round over on these. And with these being an inch and 3/8 by an inch and 3/8, so that large round over gives them a really nice look. And you can see where the router stops there at the bottom and left that square. And I actually thought that was a cool detail. This is the back side of the headboard, and like that third spindle end, you can see at the bottom there, it has a rough spot. But once you get the bed in place, never going to see that again. And I'm just cheap that way. If I can use a board and and hide it, then I will do it, because I hate wasting anything, lumber or whatever the case is. And James, that works with me in the shop, probably gets tired of me sometimes, but that's just the way I am. Definitely had a mask on doing that. That creates just a ton of dust. And you see here I'm marking that leg from the bottom of that rail on the bottom there, and that's, if you remember what I said earlier, I referenced the bottom of that rail to drill my dowel. So all I had to do was draw a line on the leg from the bottom, and then I'll line that jig up with that bottom, with that line I draw right there, and it matched up perfect. It was great. Worked out really well. You can see my finger there. I got my finger in the router just before this. Luckily, it looked horrible, but it just took one stitch. He just pulled some skin together and put a stitch in there, and it's completely healed up now. You can't really even tell it by looking at my finger. I can feel it. I've lost a little bit of feeling in the tip of my finger, but to look at it, you wouldn't have any idea I got my finger in the router. But yeah, that was pretty scary. Extremely. I couldn't even tell you how it happened. I was rounding over a tabletop. I stepped back, and somehow, I had the router going in one hand and my other hand was free, and I couldn't tell you. My finger just ended up in the router somehow. Routers are extremely useful tools, but they're also just crazy dangerous. I mean, you've got to stay on your game the whole time you've got that thing turned on. So I'm just doing a small 1/8 inch round over around the outside edges of this thing, and lots and lots of sanding. I did hand sanding. I obviously did as much as I could with the random orbit sander. I wanted all my joints to flow together, and that's why I routed it after I put it together. So as you came around those top corners, they flowed. And I think if I routed them separate, well, I know if I routed them separately, they wouldn't flow like that. They wouldn't come together like that. So definitely makes it look better, but the sanding part of it is a lot more difficult. Now these are the bed rails, and I put a chamfer along the bottom edge of them, which looks really cool. Downside, you don't really, you never see it. So this chamfer that I'm running right now. You know, you could do it or you don't. I don't, you know, that's up to you. I really like the look of it, but if you don't ever see it, you know, I don't know what to tell you. So here's the legs. This is a test piece that I made. I had these are the end legs, and there's just two of those. I've got three because I've got one that I was testing to see how it was going to look. And you see here as I'm pushing these in, I turn the router off before I pull it back out, and obviously that's to stop it from jumping out at me. So I push it in and turn the router off, wait for it to stop, and then I pulled my leg back out for those long ones on the bottom. Now once I get I had a heck of a time getting the top set up here. I'm, you know, just resetting it and resetting it until I can get it right where I want it. But I'm barely passing the router bit here, so I felt comfortable pushing it in and pulling it out. But on that long one, you know, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So I'm going to put like I said, I'm going to put the whole thing together with dowels. Now this block you see here, that block I'm going to use later to as a guide to put my holes in my headboard. So I was just setting it up against my my bed rail there just to compare it. Now I'm transferring those lines to my little legs there, and those lines are what I'm gonna use to set my dowel jig up. And once you get all those lines transferred like that, it's crazy easy. I just line it up with those lines and drill, and it worked out great. So I know a lot of people will use they'll buy parts to put the bed rails together to the legs, so you can disassemble it. But the only part that you can disassemble on this bed, the way I put it together, is the headboard from the rest of the bed, and we just carried the bed over in one part. And it barely went through I think it was 80 inches wide, and my doorway was right at 80 inches tall, so it just barely scraped through there, but we got it in. So here I'm putting the leg on the end of the bed rail with those dowels, and right there is where you'd use one of those kits if you wanted to to be able to take it apart. And I think if I was going to do that, I would just attach these legs to the rail going across the end, and then use one of those kits to attach the rail going down the side to the leg. But I'm building this bed for us, and I had already measured, and I knew I could get it in the bedroom like this, so I'd rather put it all together and have it one big piece than it's solid as a rock. It doesn't move. It's awesome, and I'd much prefer that if I can get away with it than using parts that that come apart. Now this is the end that's going to go up against the headboard. So I'm drilling those holes out a little bigger because I'm putting this threaded insert in there. And this is a super simple design. I'm just going to put that threaded insert in there, and then I'm going to have a nut and a washer coming through the headboard into those threaded inserts, and those tighten up nice. And it's, like I said, it's rock solid. Doesn't move at all. Now here I'm putting my the side rails together with the middle rail. I'm gonna make that all one big piece. And there we go. It's always nice to have a friend to hold hold stuff for you. And putting those legs on the side rails, I actually did that the day before. I let them sit in clamps. Then I came back the next day and did this. And then the next day I came back and did this. Now this is just pine that I already had. You know, the side rails on this bed are 4 inches wide, and I just cut up this pine 2 inches thick, and obviously put it across the bottom, which this is upside down, so it's along the top edge there. Glued it in place, and then I put some screws in there also. I just put this 2-inch wide board all the way around on all 3 sides. The one thing I you know, every single video there's something I have to apologize for not videotaping, and on this one it's the rest of this structure. Just I have a board going down the middle with a foot underneath it, and I'll show you a shot of that later. But did not video making that, although there's nothing to it. I mean, I just had a 2x board down there with a leg supporting, you know, right in the middle. If you can put the rest of this together, I'm pretty sure you can figure that part out. It's not a pretty part, it's just a, you know, functionary part. So you know, the rest of this is just going to be pine. I also obviously cut up some pine strips to go across these, to set across these that the mattress sits on top of. This is a platform bed. We didn't use a box spring, and you'll see shots of those here in a little bit also. Now here's what I was talking about earlier. That's that block that I made that I used the dowel jig to put those holes in it, and I put them in, you know, just the same place. I made that block. That block is 4 inches wide, just like my bed rail. And then I lined up the dowel jig on it, just like I did on the bed rail. So those holes are in the exact same place, and I use those to mark where my holes were going to be. And really, I should have done this part first, but that would be hard to do without, well, I could have used a pencil to mark where they were going to go, but I just used a Forstner bit to just so my bolt holes could sit down in there. This is the back side of the headboard, so the bolt heads are going down in that Forstner where I cut out for the Forstner bit with a washer, just insetting in there. And technically you wouldn't even have to do that. I mean, you'd just have your bolt head sticking out of the back. But here I am putting that together. You can see my wife in her pajamas there. So it's just four bolts get screwed in there. So here's the board's going across here. This board underneath with the foot right in the middle, supporting that. I just put this in here because it amazes me that this bed, as firm as it is, can roll up and fit in that tiny little roll of plastic. Blows my mind. So there it is, guys. I was really happy with this project. I'm going to do another video on the bench. If you like this video, I'd greatly appreciate it. You could like the video, subscribe to our channel. We'll continue putting videos out, and thanks for watching.